So we're here today for our session on fixing your tech disconnect. So I'm Mandy Thompson. I'll be running you through this information today, and I hope that you find it to be super helpful. We worked very hard to make sure that it is super helpful, and we're going to cover exactly what we promised today, right? So we'll cover, fixing your tech disconnect. So starting with understanding what does that mean? How do we get there? How do we figure out what we need? We have some tools and things to share with you. So I'm really excited for this one. And this is our first official webinar is the Nonprofit Tech Shop. So we are also Digital Reach Online Solutions. Nonprofit Tech Shop is a new brand that is focused 100% on nonprofits, since that represents about 75% of the folks that we work with, and we want to continue to work with more. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and this is recorded. So if anyone hops in here late, they'll be able to catch up. But before we get started, for some of y'all, it is probably your first time using Demio as a webinar platform. I think it's a really awesome platform. That's why we use it. So I want to call out a couple of things. Over here in the chat, when you're chatting, I'm going to go ahead and do this with Lizzie's comment on joining from San Diego. We can mark this as a question, and then I'll be able to see that and answer that live. So just want to call that out. So if you have a question while I'm talking, please go ahead and put it in the chat. And then myself or someone from the team that's here to assist will go ahead and flag that. And we also have Karen here. We see Karen citing in from sunny Albuquerque. She is our head of business development and knows quite a bit about nonprofits and nonprofit tech and all of that good stuff. So she'll be answering questions as well and helping to flag them in case I miss any. So if you look in your upper right-hand side, you also have polls. So there aren't any showing right now, but we will have polls. And then in the bottom left-hand corner, there isn't a link being shared right now, but we will be sharing a link with a tool that we're going to be giving to you today. So other than that, at the end, we are going to have Q&A. If you would like to come on stage and discuss your question, I can invite you on stage. And what I want to let you know is that just, if you don't want to be on camera, check what your camera settings are, because once I invite you on stage, it will invite your microphone and your camera on stage. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump on into the content. So what are we going to learn today? I already covered this a little bit, but we are going to focus on the most common issues when it comes to nonprofit tech stacks specifically. Yes, some of these issues exist across nonprofit and for-profit and all tech stacks, but there are some that are very unique to nonprofits. We're going to make sure to cover those. How do we end up with this really bad tech disconnect that we wish we didn't have, but we do? So we're going to talk about how we get there, and then high level, how do we fix it? And then we're going to get into some details and some very instructive, actionable, how do we fix it, along with some free tools that you'll be able to work with yourself. Okay, so let's talk about this. What are the most common complaints about a tech stack? And go ahead and chime in the chat if you feel like it. If any of these sound true for you. My tools are not connected. We hear this one a lot. Data does not sync, right? And then we're constantly context switching. And while at the most baseline level, and this is just my experience talking to nonprofit, I'm not saying this is true for everybody, but at the most baseline level, right, we want to be able to do some automations and personalization around the constituent or donor or member journey, right? But we can go beyond that, and we can have way more data from across our organization to make decisions about revenue, about constituents, about donors, about operations, right? We can actually automate and operationalize this data, right? But a lot of that is like a pipe dream for organizations, because just getting the stuff around marketing and interacting with donors, members, constituents is hard enough, right? So when our tools are connected, we end up doing a lot of context switching, which is way more expensive than you think. Research has shown that it takes about 15 minutes to adjust when you switch tools. And so if you're doing that a lot of times each day, we can see how it would eat up a lot of productivity. Tools that are hard to use. Unfortunately, nonprofit tech is kind of, infamously bad at, having great UI, UX. And I find that a lot of tools, not all of them, but they either fall in the category of they have a lot of power, but the UI UX leaves a lot to be desired. And that's like tools like Blackbot, Tessitura, Salesforce, Nonprofit Success Pack, soon to be the Nonprofit Cloud, right? And then on the other side, we have nice interfaces, but pretty minimal functionality. And those are tools like I know Salsa was recently sunsetted, but that had a bit of a nicer user interface. Neon CRM has a bit of a nicer user interface, Donor Perfect, etc. Right? But those aren't real CRMs. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We also have overcomplicated legacy systems. So systems that just, that make you click way too many times than you probably need to get something done, right? Like their file structure is deep rather than flat. Architecture, maybe not really thinking about the user experience when all of that was put together. We'll dig into that a little bit more later as well. Not being able to get a full view of what's going on with your donors or constituents in a single screen, right? It's hard to put together a story when you can't have a nice visualized report or looking at a household or a donor or a contact, whatever it is, and actually being able to see like all their website visits and all the events they attend and when they volunteer. And I'll give you an example later of how, easy that can be and how, nicely you can have those things laid out. A lot of marketing tasks that are very manual. So manual segmentation, if segmentation is happening at all, manual personalization, if it's happening at all. And then, not reporting nearly as granularly, not being able to bring in as many different components into one report to really be able to do a deep dive. And also in a lot of these systems, reporting is difficult to build. People also complain about not having, any or having very few automations built, which of course, at the most basic level, again, in our marketing, we want automations so that we can really give our constituents, donors, and members a personalized, wonderful experience of interacting with us. But then we can operationalize and automate and update data and keep our databases clean and just reduce a lot of manual work overall. Another complaint is using too many different tools. I know these numbers don't ring as true necessarily in the nonprofit world as they do in the for-profit world, but I believe the last time I looked, the average number of tools that a for-profit was using was somewhere between like 35 and 50. So way too many tools. And a lot of times we have the same functionality in these tools, right? And we don't even realize it because different departments are procuring them. And that brings us, we have one poll question here. So would love to see what y'all think on this. Is anybody here, yes or no question? So you go to that poll section in the upper right-hand side. Is anybody here a Salesforce nonprofit success pack user who's having to move to the nonprofit cloud? Salesforce is sunsetting their old product and launching a new one, requiring everybody to migrate. And I know there have been some pain points there around the lack of documentation, increased costs, etc. But doesn't look like, based on the responses I see, doesn't look like we have any users of Salesforce. So we will not linger there. And good for you. Congratulations that that's not part of your tech stack. Okay. So now let's talk about how did you end up here, right? If you are here, which a lot of people are, I have yet to talk to a nonprofit that isn't in some way, shape, or form here in a tech disconnect and a less than perfect, less than desirable tech stack situation, okay? So let's talk about how we got here. As I mentioned, technology gets acquired in departmental silos, right? Like marketing picks its own tools, development picks its own tools, volunteers and interns department picks its own tools. And suddenly we have all this data, often about the same constituents, that isn't connected. Like I said earlier, feature overlap. We've got all sorts of, emails are coming from here, they're coming from there. Sometimes we're sending too many emails because one department doesn't know. You don't have that whole view of all the ways that you're engaging and interacting with your constituents, right? So we also have point solutions selling themselves as a CRM. And this is one that I am it's a big pain point for me personally, because I talk with a lot of nonprofits that are like, but we have a CRM. And it's like, you could say that, right? But then it's like, okay, well, is any database a CRM? How are we defining a CRM? And that has evolved, right? That was customer relationship management. Well, now, because we engage with our customers, our donors, our constituents, our members, whatever we call them, because we are engaging with them in so many ways across so many touch points, we should really think of it as a constituent, donor, member engagement platform, somewhere where we are actually housing the full relationship, right? The R is CRM, is relationship management. To manage a relationship, you have to be able to see the entire relationship, right? So we take a tool like Donor Perfect, which if you are a really, really small nonprofit and you're just raising funds and you don't, which I don't think anyone falls into this category. I have talked to very, very small, very, very large nonprofits, and I don't think anyone falls into operations and data that are that simple. But okay, let's say we have that solution and they do some emailing and there's some segmenting and, some really nice features. It's got a nice interface, but anything else, like if you need to measure impact against the donations that you're receiving or where they're going, like where are you managing all of that? Where are you managing your grants that you're pursuing if you are pursuing that, right? Any other ways that revenue is coming in outside of donations from your constituents. And so oftentimes these point solutions, Blackbot, Razor's Edge wants to call itself a CRM, but it does not allow you to manage your entire organization. And in my opinion, if it doesn't allow you to manage your entire organization, then I don't know if you can really truly say that the system that you're working in is a CRM. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox on that one. And also we have one more poll question. If you head over and take a look at the polls, I would love to know what CRMs you use. So you can either choose one of these or other, or if you have more than one, please choose that as your answer, because a lot of times folks are using more than one. I see we've got some HubSpot users in the house. That's always a very fun one to use. Always makes me happy to see that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and continue here. No clear tech evaluation strategy, right? We're going to dig into this one more on the next slide as far as like, what does that mean? But I will tell you again, from very small to very large organizations on the nonprofit and the for-profit side, right? Publicly traded for-profit companies still don't have a tech evaluation strategy, right? So if you don't have one, if your organization doesn't have one, do not feel bad about that, because that is something that is far more common than you would ever imagine. And they also don't have a tool tracker to understand where they have feature overlap or where they have very woefully underutilized tools, right? Like if you're paying $50,000 a year for a tool that you're using 10% of, you might want to rethink if you need that tool. What value is that tool giving you? Can another tool that you have do the same thing and cut down your tech costs? And so again, these things not being evaluated is how we end up here. And then we also have tech disconnect due to tools that have a lack of native integrations. We see this, it's a rampant issue in the nonprofit space. Or they have a limited API, limited documentation on their API. Like we judge APIs in a lot of ways, right? To me, I love an API where you can access all of the different objects, all of their different properties. You can create objects, you can delete them, you can update existing ones, you can associate them. To me, that's a great API, but that's not every API. So a great way, if you're ever curious about APIs and want to kind of see how they work or how your tool's API works, go into Zapier, because a lot of them will connect to Zapier. If they connect to Zapier, check it as a trigger and check it as an action and see what is allowed. And if you want an example of the gold standard, look at HubSpot actions and triggers and see what's allowed, because it is extraordinarily robust. You can do just about anything, right? If you see in another tool that you can only create a new, let's say, donation or donor, but you cannot edit an existing one, that's a limitation. That means their API probably has that limitation as well, or you have to pay to access that part of their API. So limited APIs get us here. Poor onboarding experiences, right? Man, tech companies really want to make it sound like you just buy this tool and it's going to solve all of yours and the world's problems. And while technology is powerful, I don't care how good it is. I don't care what platform it is. If it is not fully implemented and customized, and there is no change management and adoption plans, it will not succeed. Okay, maybe if you put in something like Slack, it will succeed. Okay, but when we're talking about operational relationship management technology, if you do not have a plan, you're going to end up with people using different processes, not consistently using the tool, which then defeats the whole purpose of having this updated actionable data. And so, we see this happen, and that's how people end up here. So now let's talk about at a high level, right? How do we fix it? So to do this, as we all know, we've all probably heard this from our parents or someone in our lives, that the first step to fixing a problem is acknowledging that we have one. So I have 5 quick questions here for you that if you do not answer yes to 4 of these, then you probably have a tech disconnect issue. All right. So first one to ask is, do you have a tech acquisition process in place? And if you do have one, is it being used by all departments, or can some departments just go out and, adopt tech? For example, does your IT have rules that someone cannot sign up for a new tool unless they go through a process, right? Even if it's something as simple as, like in our calls with customers, we have Firefly's an AI recorder. Well, can anyone at our company just sign up for any AI recorder that they see in someone else's call, or do they need to use ours or get permission if they want to use another one, right? So even down to that level, do you have a tech acquisition process, and is it used across your organization? Next question to ask yourself, can you really track your entire donor or constituent journey? And I'm talking about everything they do with you, every email they open, every ad that they engage with, every landing page that they visit, every report you send out that they read, every time they use their membership in whatever way that they can, events, galas, all of this, volunteering. Can you see all of this in one tool, or even across all of your tools? Can you put it together and actually track what those journeys are for your constituents, donors, etc.? Okay. Next one. Have you done an evaluation in the last 12 months? Have you taken a look at how you're using your technology and where you have overlap and inefficiencies? Has that happened in the last 12 months? Okay, next one. Is all of your tech talking to each other so that you can actually leverage information between systems for reporting, for automations, right? Automations, let's say this system sends data to that system, and that data reaching that system now triggers an automation, right? This is all what's possible. Is that how your systems are currently set up? And then the last one, simple one, but important one. Are you happy with your tech stack where it's at today? So as I said, if you did not answer, and feel free to share anything that you have in the chat, but if you answered, if you did not answer yes to at least 4 of these, then congratulations for being here. You're in the right place. All right. So now we're going to start digging into what does it mean? Because I think it all starts here. Maintaining a tech acquisition and review process is the key to having a healthy tech stack. Even if you build the tech stack of your dreams today, hopefully, because your organization is growing and changing and innovating and evolving, it's not the tech stack of your dreams in 3 years or 5 years from now. So this process is so important, not only for getting it right today or determining if what you have is right today, but to continue to tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, continue to evaluate this so that you don't, it's a lot more expensive to fix and painful, right? It's a lot more expensive to fix a massive problem. And if you don't touch your tech stack for 5 years, how many inefficiencies? What did you lose? What are the opportunity costs along the way, right? And so super important is to start with understanding our tech acquisition process and tech usage reviews. So what is a tech acquisition process? I know I've kind of, chatted about it a little bit and had some points, but, what it is the way that you are reviewing the acquisition of tech. Right? So what is in that process? That process is going to include how you review price, how you review contract terms, how you review features, how you look for overlap with tools that you already have, how you're looking at, how important is integration of this system into other systems? Who needs to be there, right? Like, what are all the things that need to be considered? And you might have tiers, right? Like something like your CRM or your ERP or your financial management system might be top tier. Maybe a tool like a, AI note taker. For some companies, maybe that's low tier. For us, it's high tier because it all feeds into our CRM and into all of our processes, right? So I don't want folks just choosing their own note-taking software, but maybe your organization has a tier of things that people can, adding Chrome extensions, right? So like you can tier this out and have a process and start simple, but have something so you can start to learn how to make better decisions instead of getting caught up in the excitement of demos and like something you don't have today, but like, that's something you don't have today while you're getting it. It's setting you up for a problem tomorrow, right? So that's really high level what a tech acquisition process is. And we're going to get into that more and we have some tools, but really the reason we talk about these together is because they go hand in hand, right? Because if you don't have an acquisition process, then you're going to end up with tools that, you're not using or have feature overlap, right? And if you don't know where your overlap is, it's hard to know what to acquire or what not to acquire, right? So these go hand in hand. We do have a tool that we're going to be sharing here in just a moment, along with another poll question. But first, I want to get through a couple more points here. So who should be involved, right? Well, that's unique to your organization. But just to give you some ideas, if you have an IT department, work with those folks, right? They're going to think of things. It is not your job as, the VP of development and individual giving, the, head of, volunteering or, a site manager, whatever. It is not your job to think about all of these technical things. It really isn't. But if you have people, involve those people. Or if you don't have people internally, talk to a third party who is going to have your best interest in mind and who is going to think about achieving this goal and make sure that their goals are like, yeah, we want all of your data in one place. We want you to be able to see your constituent journey, make decisions, report, have better personalization and segmentation. If that's not what they're looking at and they're just looking at specific, only one tool, like you've got to look at, the bigger picture, right? So IT can really help with this if you have IT. Department leaders, right? I think that, again, it's so common that we end up seeing folks that have Blackbaud and Salesforce and HubSpot, and there's a lot of overlap there, but, advancements picked this and marketing picked that and so on and so forth, right? Operations picked Salesforce. Power users and champions of existing tools. They know the best what your tools are doing and what they're not doing. And so they're great people to get involved in this process. Operations and revenue leadership. We want to, if we're going to build the tech stack of our dreams and we're going to stop having this tech disconnect, then let's make sure we get everybody what they need, right? Because we all have different needs. Some of us are operators in the tool every day, pushing buttons, doing the work. Other people want to report and see high level, what's going on? Like, what are our trends? How have our libunts and sybunts and twibunts changed over the last 2 years? What memberships are set to renew in the last 3 months? And what is our average churn rate, right? That might be at a top level. And, for a marketing team member, they may want to see the list of people who have opted into email in the last 30 days or want a really nice and user-friendly email or email automation builder, right? So getting all of these people in the room, again, with structure around your acquisition process. So, this isn't where your tech acquisition goes to die. That's where you could actually make progress, right? But having that framework and talking to the correct people, and then budget holders, right? If budgets aren't set, well, then figure that out before we make all these beautiful plans. And then we realize that we're not going to have budget for it for 2 years, right? Or that we need to apply for a grant and it's going to take us 6 to 9 months, but we want to make change now. Things you should consider, right? Always integration capabilities. And the simpler, the better. We'll talk about that a little bit. Automation capabilities. Automation, we all, constantly in our everyday lives hear things about AI, at least I do. And automation and AI go hand in hand. Automation capabilities are very dependent on 2 things. Number one, what types of automation capabilities has the tool developed, right? What kind of workflow or automation builder exists? Do we have automations within creating lists and other things within the system. But number two is how the database is structured, right? If you take some databases like Blackbaud, databases like Tessitura, databases like, Salsa is a little bit better. It had a bit more capabilities, but, they aren't very flat. And here's what this means is in every single, when we think about this, I won't go too into the weeds here, but we're working with objects within our systems and CRMs, right? Our constituent or donor is an object. A donation is an object. A membership is an object. A household is an object, right? And they all connect to each other, right? And so whether they connect laterally or they connect with depth makes a great deal of difference in what type of data related to when we start an automation. It usually starts because of a record, an object record, right? So a contact going into that workflow, a household going into that automation workflow. That's how it starts, right? So in a very flat database, you're going to be able to grab data across all of the different things that are associated. In a deep database, it's going to be a lot harder, complex, and not as possible. The more that you can do that, the more you can automate and the easier it is to build automation. And I'm going to give you a quick look here at what it looks like to see a very flat database, right? So this is a household we made this with one of our team members, so Tian Lutz, and we can see here, this is the household. We can see the contact that lives at this household right here. We can see the donations that this household has made, and we can see the volunteering that they have done, right? They did some volunteering in 2023, did some volunteering in 2024, and then we can click right in here and we can take a look at anything about the individual, right? Because now I'm looking at the individual. And then we can go back to the household and we can look at information about the donation, right? When was the donation received? How much was in the donation, right? So we can do all of, so let me actually go back. I went to the wrong place there. So we can go ahead and go through here, right? And then we can go back to the household, right? And so all of this can be associated. And that means that if this household comes into a workflow or the contact or any of these things, now we can access all of the other data to update that data, to use it as a filter, to use it as a trigger, right? So we want to work with very flat databases more than we want to work with very deep databases. So I know that was a little bit down the rabbit hole, but I think that it's super important. So now moving forward again, let's continue to talk about what is the most important in this process. All right. So total number of tools you need to accomplish your goal, right? Like be very strict on this. And you might not be able to minimize as much as you like because, some folks in an organization are going to be able to say, I'm not getting rid of this tool no matter what. And sometimes we have to deal with that. But at least go through the exercise. What are the tools that are absolutely required to accomplish our goals, right? And we'll talk about this a little bit more with the Google Sheet we're going to share here in just a minute. And then internal resources to own tools, right? While you may have the perfect setup implementation, like again, things are going to change, processes are going to evolve, people are going to leave, new people are going to come in, they're going to have new ideas. Those ideas are going to be great. They're going to change your processes. So who is going to own your tools, right? Tool ownership is so important. And again, the tech companies are going to tell you that it doesn't take anything, but it does take effort to own tools. So make sure that you have a plan for tool ownership. And if it needs to be an external resource, then that's okay too. But know that and know how much it costs so that you know exactly what you're getting into. And then adoption probability. Is it easy to use? Are you going to continue to have a lot of context switching? If so, then, this tool might not be the one for you. And what's the cost to implement it or migrate it, right? There's a cost to that. But then there's also the opportunity cost if you don't make the change. So do simple equations, right? So what I typically do when I'm working with clients on this is they let me know what their effective hourly rate is of that person. They tell me how many hours a week they work. We adjust it for that. And then we say, okay, well, how much time do they spend doing this automated task? How many, tools a day are they switching through? Okay, you're probably losing $15,000 in productivity a year from this person because of your tech, right? And then you can go through your entire staff, and sometimes it's like, wow, that is a lot of opportunity cost. It's so while it may cost this much to make the change, wow, if we take this number 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, that's a lot as well, right? So then we can have a clearer picture to understand and to evaluate whether we want to invest in that change or not. Now, we do have a poll. Would love to see what y'all have to say about this one. Do you think that your CRM, donor management, or marketing platform has powerful automations? I know I went on a little tangent about automations and depth of databases, but I would love to hear what you think of the tools that you're working with. And then the last thing I have here is, I've got a couple more points, but in the bottom left-hand corner, we're going to share a sheet, and I'm going to go over that in just a minute, but that's what we have here. So you'll see that pop up in the bottom left-hand corner here in just a moment. And this is a Google Sheet that is going to help you understand the percentage of tools that overlap, the percentage of tools not being used, and the missing features that are needed. And but actually it ended up getting shared here in the chat by Lizzie. Little miscommunication on our side. My apologies. We will go ahead and get that shared as well as a featured action. So please give me just 1 second, and I am going to get that shared to you as a featured action. Let me go ahead and do that. My apologies doing this on the fly, but that's all right. And what you'll do is this will have, this is only going to have the option for you to view this version. So if you go ahead and download this, then you're going to be able to, well, not download now, I'm sorry, view now. But if you go ahead and take a look at that, then you'll be able to copy that. So I'm going to go ahead and share this real quick, right? So let me just give you a quick overview, and you will have to clear some values, but here's what I wanted to do, right? This is just an idea of like across the top, do all the different features that you're looking at that you need, right? And obviously that could be a lot. And then you want to go through with the tools you're using right now for different, parts of your organization. What features does that tool have, right? And what ones are you using, right? So make sure you know what it has and what you're using, because this is also where we're going to see our cost analysis of where we're having waste, right? But it's also going to let us know where we have overlap. And it's like, well, shoot, if I have 5 tools that are doing email campaign management, do I need that? Or automated email campaigns or user behavior tracking, right? So if I have this in multiple places, is that absolutely necessary, right? So we can go ahead and go through lead management, right? If this is happening in multiple places, then we can go ahead and start to make an evaluation just by putting, and then also having it be a bit of a heat map, right? Then within the cost analysis, we could take a look at our costs, number of users, and how much of the tool we're using, break down the percentage, and we can see how much we're wasting each year. And then we could take a look at tool ownership, right? Who owns it, who's managing it. That way you can have an understanding when you're evaluating your tech. Like I talked about creating that committee, like, okay, all of these people use Jira. So if we're going to consider moving off of Jira or integrating Jira with something or impacting Jira, let's get these people involved, right? And then looking at how you're integrating your tools and what you're using, where integration is not supported, and understanding like how complex is my integration environment, and could I streamline that with a really great MDM or iPaaS or doing everything server-based, okay? So go ahead, use that, clear the fields, but again, we wanted to give that to you with the fields already filled out so that you could take a look at that. Okay. So now back over to our slides where we're going to move into some solutions, right? Because that's what we're all here for, solutions, and then of course a little time for any Q&A. All right. So, it's probably very easy to see now why, right? We don't have a great process for acquiring tech and tracking how it's doing, why we end up with these tech stacks, breaking tech stacks that we end up with where we don't have everything we want, data's all over the place, and where, tech has become a hindrance instead of a helper. So again, reviewing what types of tech disconnects exist, systems that don't connect and share data, complex and hard to maintain integration, tools with different conflicting information because they're not in sync, and tools that don't provide a clear, holistic view of what's going on with, your constituents. They're hard to use. They have low adoption rates and poor onboarding and implementation. Those are the types of tech disconnects that exist. And we've gone over that, but I want to touch on that again as we get into how do we address it, right? So how can we fix them, right? We know how we got there. We didn't have clear goals with our larger ecosystem. So, here's what we want to do. Check first to see if it is possible to, within reason, fix the issues that you have, right? Define what are the issues and what are the goals with your technology, right? We should always be doing that with any acquisition. So can we do that within our current systems? And should we, right? Like there's also that, okay, we could, but it would be a pretty crazy process to do it. So, should we do that? And then what would this look like in a future state, right? Operationally, what would it look like? Reaching your goals better, what would it look like? Better reporting, better visibility. What would it look like? Like, why are you going through all of this, right? And then do you have buy-in and resourcing to fix the problem? Or could you get buy-in and resourcing to fix the problem, right? This is how we start the thought process. This is the highest level of addressing this problem. So now how do we build this tech stack of our dreams, right? We've talked a lot about the problem, identifying it, how we got there, and we just made a pivot to thinking about the solution. So now here's what I'm going to challenge you to do is to go ahead and imagine that you have a blank canvas. Like literally open up a blank Miro board or Lucid chart and do this. Imagine you have a blank canvas and you can do anything you want, right? It doesn't matter what technology you already own. And the reason I say this is I'm not saying that your organization is going to let you rip and replace everything, nor that you should. But as we all know, right? Like who's ever, I don't know, my best example is like editing. You ever got something to edit and you're just like, I'm going to rewrite this myself because that's going to be easier, right? It's like, give yourself the freedom to start anew. If you were not, bogged down with like all the things that aren't working perfectly today, what would you do if you were starting a brand new company, right? Or you didn't have any technology and you were starting from scratch. So start out with like a completely blank slate and then list out everything that you need. And I want everything that is on your wish list, right? So like write down these steps, make sure you go through these. List out or, take a screenshot of these ones. I have all of them up there. There are 5. So list out everything that you need. Like, does it need to be easy to use? Do you want to have an AI assistant in there, right? Like, what do you want to do? Because if you're going to build this thing, it might as well at least be designed as a Ferrari, right? And maybe you implement a, Toyota, maybe a Mercedes. Depends on what your tech budget is, right? But at least have a vision of what is possible. That way you can start from there. And then if you have to pare back, you could choose and maybe categorize those, right? Like what are the absolute must-haves, nice to haves, right? We've all done that before. Okay. And then list out every tool that it takes today to accomplish your core operational needs. Every single tool that it is taking, even if it is spreadsheets, Word docs, Google Docs, SharePoint, whatever it is, what does it take today, right? And then I want you to start evaluating new options, right? I want you to start looking at tools that exist on the market today and if they can accomplish everything. And again, this is where get that committee involved, get somebody technical involved. Look at Zapier, like I mentioned, to see what connects. If you're looking at a tool like HubSpot, go into their marketplace and see if everything integrates or if it integrates with Salesforce. Like, how hard is it going to be? Because at the end of the day, you want all of your data talking to each other. You want it all to end up in one place. You want it to be, whether you want a single source of truth in a like HubSpot or Salesforce, or if you want a distributed source of truth where you have a core system like HubSpot or a core database like snowflake, but you want everything to be true everywhere else, whatever that is, right? Like evaluate options that can do it, not options that can just do part of it. Zoom out, even if it's not your department. If you're going to ask your organization to make big change, then the change is going to need to accomplish goals for everybody, right? So zoom out. How can it solve for all of these needs? And you might need to, again, get that committee together to do that. And then start to compare costs, right? This is high level. We're going to get down in the weeds in just a second here, right? But compare cost of ownership and acquisition to what you're currently doing. So like, what's the cost of ownership? Well, do you have an outside agency or consultancy helping you to own things? You have developers in-house that are completely dedicated to this. You have an IT team or business process team that's committed to this. Within teams, does someone on the team spend 20% of their time, like really dig into this? A lot of times this might not be documented, you know? In a professional services companies like ours, we have this documented, right? But if you're not doing what we're doing, you might not be looking at like, well, Mandy spends 20% of her time doing this, 15% of her time doing that. And this isn't to pick apart how people are spending their time. But if we want to know what it is costing us, dollars and cents, to own our current tech stack, then we have to know these things, right? So go ahead, find out that information. And then we want to understand also what your wasted tech is, right? Using that spreadsheet. And also your opportunity costs, right? That other calculation I talked about with all the time wasted doing manual thing, checking to see if data is correct here, there, everywhere, right? Switching all the time. How much is it costing us, right? Because that's going to give you the real cost of what you're doing today. So you have something to compare to what you want to do tomorrow, right? So now let's get a little bit further into like, how do we build this picture of tomorrow? And then we'll have time very shortly here to jump into Q&A. So how do we do this? So let's start with step one. And step one, this is getting, again, further into the weeds. Feel free to screenshot. Create a diagram of what your operations look like, right? And maybe right now just for your department, but then maybe work with other departments. Maybe initiate a project, chart it out, and get it put together. And they don't have to be beautiful, right? And so I'm just going to give a quick look here, and then we'll go back into the slideshow. Like, this is a process we created for our hiring process. We use HubSpot as our applicant tracking system and customized it to do so. So I just went through what the process was, and like these little icons is like, okay, where we're going to have an automation, where we're going to send an email, right? Used all these little if-then situations and just charted out the full process. A little person shows where a person needs to get involved, right? Went through this entire process, and this allowed me to understand what the process was, so I could that would help me determine, can I meet these needs within the system that I have, right? Or do I need another system to do this? So that's the first thing, is we want to start to chart out, right? And then once we started to chart things out, don't worry, I don't expect you to create a chart like this. This is just going to be an example, right? So once we have started to chart things out, now we want to start to add some automations, connections, like how could this thing be operationalized? Because this is going to help you to know if the tools you're looking at can do it, right? Like, now obviously like with the applicant tracking system, I laid this out knowing exactly what HubSpot could do. But while I was going through, I did have to go through and check like, well, am I thinking a little too far out here? Could I do this? Well, I have to go into Zapier, whatever. Was able to build it all within HubSpot. But I'm going to go ahead and share another example here. So this is what it looked like to dig in, right? I started going through what is everything that it's going to take right here, right? For a landing page, for a job, I need all of these things, right? I need all of these things to make the form. But then these are all of the different automations that I needed. Now, this was super detailed, right? Like, what's the trigger going to be? What's the action going to be? What's the delay going to be? What are my if-then branches? But I figured out exactly what it was going to take to build this. That way I could actually go out and build it. And I did so. A simpler way to do this, right, might look a little bit more like this, where we have, like this, like this is what donor development does. They get this pledge information, create a donor, move to this stage, then an automated workflow runs, then we do this, right? So this is more of a swim lane style. So basically, regardless how you do it, start to chart this out. And this is necessary for a few reasons. It's going to help you be able to choose tools. It's going to show the folks that you are, working with, that you have a plan, and that you might not, hey, I'm not saying you need to finish this for your entire organization, but if you do this for your department, you're going to get way more buy-in and people taking it seriously and wanting to get involved. I'm telling you, charting makes people extraordinarily happy. We do this for a living. We do this all the time. Just like I said with people's tech stacks and not having an acquisition process for companies that are very large, you would also, not be surprised to hear that very large organizations also don't have any of this. So just starting to chart it out, you will get attention, and it's going to help you to not you will get the attention of the stakeholders if you don't have it already. If you already have it, great, still chart it out, right? Because that way you're going to be able to go to somebody, to a technology provider, to a consultant, and you're going to be able to reconcile that with what the recommendations are and ensure that what you're choosing is going to allow you to do everything you want to do operationally, and that it's going to get all of your data into the places where you need that data to be. Okay, now on to our third step. Our third step is to create a diagram with all of your existing tools, all right? So this one is a really big one. It's all blurred out because this is actually for a client, but this is connecting all of the wild stuff that we are doing. And so we've got, in the very center here, all of these little databases and what they all connect to, and then what departments they help. And in these green boxes, we have automation processes that are related to integrations. In the purple boxes, we actually have database data sharing processes. And then in the big boxes on the outside, we have business processes and how all of this relates. Now, I'm not saying you need to get here, but at least start connecting the tools, right? You can do something as, simple as we use HubSpot and it does this. We use Donor Perfect and it does this. And do these connect or not, right? If they don't connect, then we might not have, let's say that we have a Blackbot, right? And maybe on this line, we'll put an X because there is no connection, right? And then we can list out the things, with Blackbot. We're doing grant management, We might want to list out which teams are using it, or do a little, key at the top. Like if it's a yellow sticky, it's this team. If it's a red sticky, it's that team, etc. But even something as simple as this, like what's happening in each system, what data is it connecting, what's being collected. You start here, you can one day end up with the giant, chart that connects everything, right? So once you've charted this all out, I mentioned this in the earlier steps at the high level, we're back to checking to see if this is possible in the system that you have today. Again, I said it earlier, I'll say it again. I think there are only two real CRMs on the market when it comes to nonprofits or for-profits that can truly connect, operationalize all of your data, report, and bring everything into one place. And those are HubSpot and Salesforce. Your organization might not need that. I think that most organizations do, and they could find a way to attain that. But of course, some are not going to. So check with everything you want to do. Can you do it in Donor Perfect? Can you do it in Blackbot? Can you do it wherever it is that you are working today? Okay. And then the last thing is, as we talked about before, calculate that tech waste. Know exactly how much you're wasting, because then once you have all of this together, you can go to your stakeholders and you can say to them, hey, this is exactly how much we're wasting. This is exactly what we could build. Here's what it would do. Here's the time it would save. So when are we going to get started, right? So to recap, and then we'll open up Q&A. And then I have one more thing to share with you. If you haven't taken our tech assessment, I do want to go ahead and give you an opportunity to scan that QR code and take that, but we'll get to that in just a moment. So there's a formula for how you ended up here, if you are here, right? Like there's a formula to getting to the place where your tech is not what you want it to be. There is also a formula to getting it right, though. So that's the good news, and we've gone over that here today. And it all starts with understanding your goals and where you're at today, and being honest about where you're at today with your tech stack and wastage and opportunity costs and, missed operations that you want to build, all of that. And then if you diagram and you start to get all of this, written down and into spreadsheets, it's going to make it a lot easier to make a decision, to get buy-in, and then to manage the decision that you made. Because as we talked about earlier, this is going to be an ongoing evolution. Hopefully, it should be. And then put together the dollars and cents, right? It's not, they're simple equations. Happy to help. If you want to talk to someone to get help with this, we're always happy to do it. You can head over to the Nonprofit Tech Shop website, right? And I'll share this tab real quick, right? So nonprofittechshop.com. And, if you go to Let's Talk, then this is Karen, who you also see in the chat. So now you see her face. So you can grab a time to talk to Karen and chat about it. Always happy to help. No pressure consultations, no cost consultations. All right. So we have some time for Q&A, and then I'm just going to share with you after that our tech assessment so that you can take that if you would like to take that. But yeah, does anybody have any questions? I don't see any in the chat right now, and I'm not going to, twist anybody's arm. If you don't have any, I'll just look at that as we covered, everything. So, and this wasn't really a super technical, a lot of our webinars get really into the weeds on how to do things. This, of course, was more of like, how do we understand and address a big problem? And then, we can go out from there and get more granular, right? And there will be more content following this. I'm going to talk about our upcoming webinars. But if I don't see any questions pop in, I'm just going to go ahead and cruise right over here and talk about our tech assessment. So you can scan that QR code right there. And I will also, go ahead and drop this into, actually, I'm going to go ahead and share this with you so that you can take the tech assessment. So our tech assessment, what is special about it is that we put a lot into this, right? So this is not some, lead capture, this is not some lead capture tool. This is really robust. This is really comprehensive. And so this tool is going to allow you to, in 4 different areas, you will have 4 questions, okay? When you take this, for each of the 4 areas, you are going to get a grade, whether you're beginner, intermediate, or advanced in each of these sections. And you will get personalized recommendations on what to do now in a guide based on how you scored in each of those 4 sections. We also have one for marketing, but you can go ahead and start with the one for tech. So if you haven't jumped over to the link, here is what it looks like. Very easy, simple, straightforward questions. You can take this assessment. So you'll get your own grade. You'll get your guide based on what your scores were. And then you'll also get a full guide that is comprehensive and detailed on how you get to beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels in each of these areas to really improve your tech stack and how you are using technology. Okay. So closing out here, hopefully you got to grab a hold of that. Our next couple of webinars that are going to be coming up, we'd love to hear. We're going to have a poll here asking which one you would rather hear about, but how HubSpot is solving for big nonprofits in bigger and better ways. If you want to take a deeper look at HubSpot, or another one that would be coming up, or you can let us know in the chat which you would prefer, is revenue is not a dirty word for NPOs and why embracing RevOps furthers your mission. So let us know if either of those sound interesting to you. And then the last thing I have here is, let me go ahead and get back over to the slide deck, is if we are not already connected on LinkedIn, please go ahead, scan the QR code. Would love to be connected, chat about your tech stack. I share nonprofit information. Karen Sinet from our org, a lot of people from Nonprofit Tech Shop and Digital Reach share a ton of really great information. So that is all I have for you today. And it doesn't look like we have any questions. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I hope that you enjoyed this content. And I hope that we hear from you with questions that you have. And most importantly, I hope you start using these tools and the approach that we discussed today to create the technology stack of your dreams, because it really can be a big help and not a hindrance, but it just takes some planning to get there. So thank you again for being here, and have a wonderful rest of your week.